Hello, Jarek here. Almost 9 months ago, to this day, Crysis 2 was released, and it got a very mixed reception. People either seemed to really love it, or they really hated it. There was very rarely anything in between. Personally myself, I found the game fantastic. I had a lot of fun with it. When I play a game, I completely shut out all other opinions. I don't know anything about the game, I go into it blind. Then once I beat the game, I go to the internet to see what they thought. So I did one of these. Damn, that was a really fun game. I wonder what the internet thinks of it. What the? Admittingly, I played the game on launch 9 years ago. The only other time I had played it was just a few days ago when I streamed through it. So I have two questions for this video. One, how bad is Crysis 2 really? And two, does my opinion, my memories, do they hold up? First things first, let's talk about the plot. Yeah, skip forward there if you don't want to get spoiled. I'm going to have to talk about spoilers. The only part of this story that means anything is the beginning and the end. Everything in between just kind of is a jarbled mess that you won't remember. So if you don't want to get spoiled, click forward to this time. Are they gone? Okay, let's talk. As I said, most of the story is just a garbled mess. They throw new characters at you left and right, but they don't really serve any purpose other than just to yell at you, yell at someone around you, or yell at nothing in particular. You really won't remember most of the story. You could read the clip notes and do an entire homework project on it being perfectly fine. Unlike the first game, you don't play as Prophet. You play as a lowly marine by the name of Alcatraz. You're called into New York City to back up Prophet, one of the main characters in the first game. While your submarine sinks, you almost die, Prophet pulls you out, and in a scene that the game loves to play over and over again, Prophet puts you in the suit while shooting himself.
Remember me.
The reasoning for this is that there is a big infection going around New York City. This game also takes place in 2023, so I guess this is where we'll be in 3 years. Prophet got infected and needed to separate the link between him and the suit. Almost everything from this point on till the end of the game is just kind of an excuse to throw more enemies at you. The one thing I do remember about the middle of the game is that the voice acting is awful, which is rather strange because I don't remember that from when I first played and no one else seems to point it out. For example, you're walking through a subway as civilians are getting evacuated. The infected ones are left behind. At one point you see a man's wife being separated from him, but this is what you hear.
I don't care, she's scared. You let me in with her.
The rather monotone voice acting completely pulls me out of this moment and I cannot take it seriously at all. The same thing can be said for almost every voice actor in the game. They're either monotone or trying way too hard. All the military actors sound like hardasses, but not in a way that seems legitimate. In fact, pretty much any antagonist in this game just seems like an antagonist for being an antagonist. How do you know he's the bad guy? Well, because he's a dickhead.
And last time I checked, we both
That's where you're wrong, Miss Strickland. You work for him. I answer to the cell executive board on the DOD. I don't give a shit what some senile old shareholder like Hargreave may or may not like.
You want to be careful what enemies you make here, Lockharts.
This conversation is over.
Anyway, let's move on to things that actually matter. Near the end of the game, you work for, briefly get backstabbed by, and then work for a character again by the name of Hargreave. Hargreave is the person that designed these suits to begin with. During the entirety of the game, you were also fighting aliens in New York City. And in the big twist, your suit is apparently sentient and Prophet comes back. Hargreave apparently knew all these aliens were around and he wanted to use the suits himself to deal with the problem. He could have just told some people, but, you know, whatever. Anyway, throughout the entirety of Crysis 2, the suit is effectively working on what is an antibody for the aliens. At the end of the game, the suit uses this to eradicate all aliens from New York City. Prophet reveals that it's not just New York, aliens have been here the entire time we have been around as a human species, and there's a lot more work to be done. Oh, also, Prophet takes over Alcatraz's body and now he's back, so now you're just Prophet again? This was really weird. But really, that's all you need to know. You killed all the aliens in New York, Prophet is back in the suit, and you can move on to Crysis 3. There, I just saved you 7 or 8 hours of playtime. I really do mean when I say the entire middle section of this game means just nothing story-wise. Crysis 1 I felt had a better story that was simple, easy to follow, with an awesome twist in that alien ship that you just did not expect. Sure, the aliens weren't as fun to fight, but still, you knew what was going on. But you know, whatever. No one plays Crysis 2 for the story, people are playing it for the gameplay. So how was the gameplay? Before we get to the gameplay, we have to talk about the graphics. Crysis 2 is a looker, and it always has been. However, something I've noticed to be kind of weird about Crysis 2 is that it doesn't seem to look as good as Crysis 1. Don't misunderstand me, these two games were some of, if not the best looking games when they came out. But the thing I noticed about Crysis 1 is that if you weren't in dense foliage, the game honestly didn't look that great. When you went into a building, the textures were kind of low quality, and it just didn't look like that signature Crysis game we knew. Well, where does Crysis 2 take place? downtown New York City. The CryEngine naturally did a lot better in forested areas, and in the middle of downtown, you don't really have much forest. If you don't believe me, look at some of the textures in Crysis 1 that are very dated. Most notably the rock textures and again, anything inside. Crysis 2 has that same problem, it's just a lot more noticeable. But that said though, I think its biggest problem graphically was that it came out the same year as Battlefield 3, and in my opinion Battlefield 3 looks better. Either way, I'm nitpicking. This game came out 9 years ago and it still looks good today. Now we can move on to the gameplay, and this is what gets people going. People that really like Crysis 1 get really upset with the gameplay in Crysis 2. Crysis 1's approach to gameplay was sort of an open sandbox, very similar to that of Far Cry 1. Crysis was a spiritual successor to Far Cry 1. The game would throw you not in an open world, you can't go wherever you want at any given moment, you can't backtrack, but it would throw you into a fairly open sandbox. You still knew where to go, there was still a path to go to, but you could really go to that objective in any way you wanted to. Keep in mind, this is in 2007. Halo was at its height, the Modern Warfare craze kicked off modern military shooters, and Half-Life 2 Episode 2 just came out. Games were very linear back then, and they didn't have the freedom that Crysis gave you. Crysis 2, on the other hand, took the linear approach. Crysis 1 fans were mad. Fans of Crysis games said it was more like Call of Duty, in that it was now very casual. Because anything that's linear is apparently Call of Duty. And I'm here to tell you no, that's not what Crysis 2 was. Crysis 2 is a linear game, yes, but the type of linear it is not like Call of Duty. You still have a lot of choices you can make. Crysis 2 will funnel you down a specific path, but anytime there's any actual combat, it's more like a multiplayer arena with a squad to take out. Does that sound familiar? Yes, it should, because that's just like Fear. In fact, this is the way a lot of shooters were. Half-Life 1 did the same thing, Half-Life 2 did the same thing, the entirety of the Halo trilogy did the same thing. Linear is not bad when it's done well, and Crysis 2 did linear very well. In fact, as far as combat is concerned, aside from the extra freedom to the player that Crysis 1 gives you, I would dare to say Crysis 2's combat is way better than the first game. First, let's talk about the guns, because it wouldn't be a Jarek video if you weren't talking about guns. Look, guns in games are cool, I'm sorry. Crysis 1's weapons did their job and they felt fine, but they were lacking a lot of polish. The reloading animations looked and felt odd, and the weapons didn't exactly have the impact that some other games did of its time. Crysis 2, on the other hand, has much better reloading animations and a bigger weapon arsenal to use. None of these are actual real guns, but they look and feel like they could be. Their designs are logical. My favorite is probably the Feline, which looks like an SMG variant of the F2000. Really, I just like any SMG that sprays a lot of bullets very quickly.
Bullets.
But there's also some sci-fi weapons, like say a microwave gun that makes aliens pop, and then there's also the Cable, which looks like an electric version of the Crysis. It will electrocute any enemy it hits, whether it's a human or an alien. It's very useful. I could talk about any weapon in the game. They're all very satisfying, and in my opinion, a massive improvement over the first game, but I'll stop there. The other big change I need to say is that the aliens are nothing like they were in the first one. I can hear the collective sighs of relief. One of the biggest complaints people had in Crysis 1 was just that the aliens weren't very fun to fight. I don't think they're as bad as people say, but they're definitely not as good as fighting the North Koreans. Well, the solution to that in Crysis 2 was just to make the aliens also walk on two legs. You'd think this may make the aliens seem a bit similar to the humans, and they kind of do, but keep in mind you fight a lot more aliens later on, and they're a lot more tough to fight than humans. They're also a lot more agile, able to jump into higher objects, and in general are just more of a threat. These enemy types are used to escalate the game's difficulty after you've already become accustomed to what the game has thrown at you before. And it works. The things I remember the most about Crysis 2 are the last levels when you're fighting basically just the aliens. You get to get a view from a view top, see where the aliens are, you can stealth in and stealth kill them, or you can just go wild and do whatever you want. I should point out that the nanosuit is obviously back, but it's been changed a little bit. Instead of having a suit menu, all of your suit abilities have been streamlined. To use speed, all you do is start sprinting. You now can activate an armor mode, which just makes you not take any damage until your suit power wears out. To super jump, you just hold down the spacebar, and the cloak comes back, but it doesn't drain your energy anywhere near as quick. This makes the suit a lot easier to use. With one push of a button, you're doing whatever you want. I personally myself prefer this way more than the way the first game did it, but that's just me. You also can upgrade the suit by getting a certain amount of points by killing aliens, and the upgrades are usually just quality of life changes. Things like your suit not draining energy as fast when you're cloaked. Stuff like that. In fact, the only real things I can complain about with the combat is that A, it's not as open as the first game, and B, the AI can be rather dumb. But the AI was equally as dumb in the first game, so whatever. As a brief mini rant, why does it seem like AI hasn't been improving at all, or hasn't improved since 1998 with Half-Life 1? We got a brief viewing of how good and how fun good AI was to fight with the original Fear, and then no one followed the original Fear and it just kind of went backward. Anyway, that's about everything you need to know about Crysis 2. So the question is, how bad is Crysis 2 really? And before I give you the answer, I want to say one more thing real quick. According to my YouTube analytics, about 95% of my viewers are male, so welcome to the sausage party, I guess. Also, apparently 75% of people that watch me aren't subscribed, and only 14% click the bell. If you enjoy this content, it would help me a lot if you consider subscribing and clicking that bell, leaving a comment, liking, subscribing, and sharing the videos around. I know everyone says this, but it does genuinely help us when we do. If you don't like it when I say these things, I'm sorry, man, it's my job. I like sharing these videos, I like working on these videos, but I also like paying bills and rent, and I rely on this money to pay bills and rent. Okay, so how bad was Crysis 2 really? It wasn't. Here's the thing I've come to notice. The people that dislike Crysis 2 really dislike Crysis 2, but if you look at reviews, if you look at feedback, most of it is positive. More people than not like this game. But the people that dislike it are really going to make sure you know that it's factually a bad game. To that I will say, your subjective opinion is wrong and Crysis 2 is good. See, I can also do the same thing. In a more real talk, Crysis 2 is just a different game than Crysis 1, and I understand why some people were upset with it. Personally myself, I just don't agree. Crysis 2 was right up my alley. I liked more linear games like Fear, like Half-Life, like Halo, so of course I'm gonna like Crysis 2. It was a well-polished game that didn't really have any major issues. People like to say it was consoleized, but again, it did the same things that popular PC games did, so I don't agree with that either. What I will say is I don't think Crysis 2 aged quite as well as Crysis 1. Crysis 1 has a unique feel. It did things that other games didn't do, in more ways than just the graphics, whereas Crysis 2 kind of followed along with what other games did. So again, I understand why some people are upset. It's a different game than the first game, but it's more of my thing. Anyway, that about sums up everything I wanted to say about Crysis 2. Thanks all of you guys for watching. Thank all you people that came over to Twitch and joined me over there. I've gotten a lot of subs this month and it means so much to me. If you want to come check out my Twitch is twitch.tv/JaredForGamingDragon. If you subscribe, you get to see my videos early and ahead of time. Thank all you guys for watching, and I'll see you next video.